He is the Tide's leading tackler, and it's not really close. 12 more than the next guy. He's the only player on the team with multiple interceptions, and he's a freshman. Caleb Downs has been a bright spot in the Tide secondary this season and earned himself the title of Freshman of the Week, per our friend and 24/7 Sports, Chris Hummer. So here to talk more about it is the man himself. It's National College Football writer Chris Hummer. Chris, we'll hit on your story breaking down the top true freshman of the week, but we've got to start with the aforementioned player, Caleb Downs. He had quite the performance for Alabama in the Tide's win over A&M. Overall, though, how important has he been to a Tide team that, let's say, isn't necessarily doing what they usually do, which is dominating opponents right now?
He's been critical. I mean, Alabama had to go into the transfer portal and take a safety from UAB in May. That's how big of a question mark that secondary was for them. And for Caleb Downs to play the way he has made everything easier for this Tide team. You mentioned earlier he's the Tide's leading tackler. He also leads the team in interceptions. He's playing like one of the best safeties, not only for Alabama, but in the entire country. I believe he is the number 3 safety in the SEC in terms of his PFF grade. He's played his best ball in SEC play. He had a breakout game against Ole Miss. He was awesome against Mississippi State. And then he changed the game against Texas A&M over the weekend. He has lived up to his billing as a 5-star recruit. And I don't cover recruiting day to day, but I still talk to people around the country, and people have been talking for over a year now about the impact Caleb Downs is going to have on the college level. People discussed him as the most ready to play true freshman in the 2023 class, and he's living up to those expectations and doing a lot more.
Oh yeah, you might not cover recruiting on a daily basis, but Blair does, so we'll ask him about it. I mean, Blair, he was the number 1 safety in the class, and Chris alluded to it. He was called one of the safest players, which I love kind of the play on words there. But what did you maybe see during his evaluation that led you to believe that what he's doing now is what he was always poised to do at this next level?
The last evaluation opportunity for us was in San Antonio earlier this year at the All-American Bowl, where he spent a whole week competing against some of the best players in the country. And you see it there in that setting, right, where it's best on best, where he's going up against guys that are just as strong as he is, just as fast as he is. But his business-like approach, I think, really stood out to me. He had nearly 36 scholarship offers. He took official visits to Georgia, Notre Dame, Ohio State, and Bama. And you always wonder how ready he might be to step on the field right away and make an impact. It's definitely hard to do so at a place like Alabama. But the way he attacks the football field, right? The way he goes in and makes plays, his versatility. He can play strong safety. He can play the nickel. He can play some slot. He can play out wide in certain formations. Everything that he brings to the table has made him a valuable asset for the Alabama Crimson Tide, and it's no surprise to us. We had him number 1 among safeties, and this is a player that's going to be making a lot of noise for years to come.
It's for a reason. I mean, especially walking into a place like Alabama. You said Nick Saban, this is a position he coaches very closely, and also, as Chris said, it was a position of need for the Tide. Another player who stood out to you was Clemson defensive tackle Peter Woods, a former 4-star prospect in the 23 cycle. What impressed you most about his play?
Clemson needed him on Saturday. He's played well all year, but they were in a tight game with Wake Forest, and Clemson really couldn't move the ball. And the reason why Clemson won that game is their defensive front. Wake Forest was held to 2.6 yards per carry, and that's a Wake Forest team that has to run the ball to be successful offensively. And it went beyond that. Peter Woods was in the backfield a lot. He had 3 pressures on Saturday from the inside. He's one of those rare interior rushers who can create penetration and also eat up blocks at the same time. He's a really special player, and he's somebody that's been playing at a high level. I know it's pretty easy to overlook a defensive tackle on the inside, but Peter Woods is playing at an outstanding level, and Clemson always seems to have a defensive lineman or 2 that are going to go on to play in the NFL for a long time, and Peter Woods is certainly that from their 2023 class.
Yeah, he was walking into a good situation with history. As you said, a lot of Clemson defensive linemen are all across the NFL right now. But Blair, we did rank him 59th in the class, so this was somewhat expected. But how does Woods fit right into that Clemson defensive line room, again, with so much great history?
He's super athletic, super quick twitch. He's got the ability to be violent with his hands, and it's difficult for freshmen, especially up front, to be able to match up against players that are 2-3 years older than he is, more mature, stronger players that have already been in a college weight room. But he's no stranger to this. We mentioned it earlier, or we saw it on the screen. He helped Thompson to 4 state titles in Alabama. That means he played as a freshman in 2019 and was doing that against players that are already 3 years older than he is. He's difficult to block. He's got the versatility to play on the inside or on the outside. He can play some pass rush situations. He can really chase the ball carrier on run plays. A player that can do a little bit of everything with his fluidity to apply pressure and get after the quarterback. He's going to continue to make an impact and continue to see the field for Clemson.
I love seeing the high school highlights and the college highlights. Very similar, just different jerseys. Chris, another defender that you liked in Week 6 was Purdue safety Dillon Thieneman. He had 8 tackles in the loss to Iowa, but where was his impact felt in this one?
Everywhere, frankly. He is an eraser for Purdue's defense. You see that interception on the screen right now. What you don't see is him sprinting some 25 yards straight across the field to kind of pull that interception off. He is a center fielder, a true center fielder back there as a free safety, but he also is comfortable playing the box. He leads Purdue with tackles on the season, and he has excellent closing speed. If you go, I wrote an article a couple weeks ago where I looked at Dillon Thieneman a little closer, and he's just somebody who makes plays everywhere. He's a sure tackler. He leads the team with 3 interceptions on the year. He has just been a playmaker all year for a Purdue defense that needs the help in year 1 under Ryan Walters. I don't know who's playing better this year, Caleb Downs or Dillon Thieneman, but they are 2 of the best safeties, period, in the country right now. Dillon Thieneman is playing that well.
Whew, that says a lot. Again, Caleb Downs was the number 1 safety in his class. Thieneman is the number 14th player in the state of Indiana, but of course a nice in-state win. So with a new staff at Purdue, Blair, I mean, how important are maintaining those in-state relationships, especially when they lead to guys like Dillon Thieneman?
It's huge because you can continue to sell the program to those in-state recruits. I mean, the state of Indiana is going to be a lifeblood for Ryan Walters and for that staff. They're not going to be able to go from coast to coast like maybe some other blue blood programs to get top tier talent. They have to be able to attack the in-state schools and go after some of these players like Dillon Thieneman who maybe slipped through the cracks, and they go after him. They ended up signing 4 of their top 7 commitments from within the state. And, when you think about him and the impact he's had, he had 2 brothers that played at Purdue. When you go into other recruits' homes and you sell the vision and the trajectory of what this program can be to an in-state prospect and point to what Dillon Thieneman is doing, that's all you need. That you need that example to be able to pitch to recruits and to sell the future of the program and to say, hey, look, you could be what he is for us in a couple years. And then you think about maybe the official visits or other prospects getting on campus and meeting with him and talking about the experience as an in-state player playing for maybe a home state school like Purdue. It's invaluable.
Just makes the pitch a lot easier. You don't have to convince them. You just have to show them. I'm going to be less threatening this time, but if you would please hit that like button, we would be so appreciative of that. Chris, we have one last freshman to spotlight here. NC State wide receiver Kevin Concepcion, 8 catches for 102 yards last week and 2 scores in the 48-41 win over Marshall for the Wolfpack. He leads the team in both receiving yards and touchdowns. What is it that makes him such a great weapon for NC State?
He's just been awesome all year for NC State, and NC State needed him to be. This was an NC State team that entered the year with big question marks at receiver. They actually have 2 true freshmen playing a lot of snaps at receiver this year. But Kevin Concepcion's already the no doubt number 1 target for this team. He had 15 targets against Marshall on Saturday, which led the team by, I think, 10. And on the season, he has 50 targets already. No other NC State receiver has more than 23, I believe. So he has emerged as both a favorite for Brennan Armstrong, who is now on the bench, and very quickly for MJ Morris, who threw at him early and often on Saturday. And he's just a playmaker. He's somebody who can work inside and outside. He mostly plays inside for NC State. He is a prototypical slot receiver, and he's made plays in the open field. He's got a ton of yards after catch this year. He is exactly what NC State needed at that position, and he looks like he's going to be a playmaker for the Wolfpack for a long time.
Yeah, Blair, another in-state win here and another 3-star prospect. So why do you think that maybe some freshmen are able to come in early and make an impact despite not maybe being one of the top guys at his position coming out of high school?
It's all about stylistic fit. You mentioned, Chris, the 50 targets. I don't know if there's a true freshman that would have thought about that heading into college and wondered, oh, how many times are going to throw me the ball through the first month of the season? I think this is what we're going to see. This is a trend in the NIL era, is maybe a recruit that could go to a higher ranked school or a school that maybe is known to develop players or kind of a bigger name program, but instead they can go to an NC State and be the top playmaker and be the face of that offense, and then potentially, depending on how the chips fall, you could always in a way find yourself in a different situation. We saw that with Dorian Singer at USC, who was doing some amazing things at Arizona. They lose him. He transfers, heads on over, and is now one of the best weapons for Caleb Williams. I think this is what's going to start to happen now in recruiting when some of these schools like the Ohio States, like the Florida States, like the Alabamas are stocking up at certain positions. Players like Kevin Concepcion can go to maybe a smaller school, really showcase themselves under the spotlight and continue to blow up and potentially move up in kind of their own sense.
Definitely a lot of opportunity, but for him himself, it takes a lot of trust to get that many targets. And speaking of trust, we always trust you, Chris, to bring us the goods. Thank you so much for being on the show. You can check that full article online at 247sports.com. And he does this every week, so be sure to check back in weekly to find out which freshmen are standing out all across college football.